We're close to starting time. I'm gonna, as is my excuse me, my habit, gonna make a few sort of introductory comments, um, and allow people to show up for the first minute or two after the session has formally started. Um, I'm remembering that back when I was in college, no class started more than before 7 minutes after the hour. So in this era of COVID, I guess with the advantages such as they are of being able to have online events, we can start more promptly than that. Um, as I did say a moment ago, we are quite thrilled and excited to have you, Professor Rab, as our uh, president of Hunter, as our guest speaker tonight. Um, and I do want to say, I mean, we are of course very fortunate to have such a great public institution here in our community, and as I'm sure most of us know, it's very highly ranked, both in terms of the quality of its academics and scholarship, but also, and I'm pleased to say this because I discovered about 10, 12 years ago, I'm really a teacher. I've been doing some college teaching in a variety of areas. And most of my teaching has been, in fact, a portion of it was at the CUNY School of Professional Studies, was online, and most of it was for first generation college students. So this field of college education, making opportunity available to our students from all walks, all communities, all backgrounds, is both very important and very exciting to me. And I'll just comment briefly that of course Hunter has a broad program in the liberal arts and social studies, and of course its great School of Social Work. And I'm going to mention, as I tend to do, some things that are not directly germane, but my grandfather was actually a college professor, a somewhat different field. He was a Chaucer scholar, but my grandmother was a social worker, and in the course of her years, had spent time in that field. And I mean, I think we all know it's both a hugely important field, and perhaps especially now in this era of COVID, having skills not just in sort of the more analytic disciplines, but also in the arena of social work and understanding how we can support our students and our families and our community in having a sort of more healthy environment and looking out for their social and emotional needs is hugely important. Having said that, Taina, again, I want to thank you for setting up this session, and I want to turn it over to you. I am most thankful and excited for what you've done and for what we will experience. So please, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Peter, and thank you, President Rabb, for joining us. I did notice that our esteemed council member, Ben Kalos, is on, and so I wanted to give him an opportunity to say a few words.
Great. Anywhere that Taina and Jennifer are is a place I want to be. By way of background, I had the opportunity to work with Taina when she worked with Jennifer, and I worked for Jonathan Bing, former Assembly Member Jonathan Bing, and we had a good time, and I learned a lot about precision and being effective from President Rabb. Also, just a big fan of her for sending her daughter to the best high school in the city of New York, which arguably it might be neck and neck with Hunter's program, which she also runs. I want to thank Peter Patch for his leadership of the Education Committee. He was actually a participatory budgeting delegate for me. He decided how to spend a lot of my money. He went around to every school in the neighborhood about what their needs were. And I think he set aside $35,000 for about 10 schools that ended up going to laptops. Those laptops went home with kids when the pandemic started. And so whereas for the rest of the city, kids were scrambling, trying to get 300,000 laptops, and there's still 60,000 kids who still don't have it while we're learning remotely. All the kids in our districts got to eat, whether or not they lived in the district. And Peter actually made sure those laptops went to schools that didn't have kids who lived in the district. So thank you, Peter. So you want to respond to that?
No, I just want to thank you for what you do in support of our community, and I'm a bit of an addict around education and higher education. So I'm just thrilled to be a part of this and thrilled to do anything I can to support our pre-K, our primary school students, middle school, high school, and all the way up to college and beyond.
Thank you. And I see a lot of VIPs on this call, so I don't want to get in trouble by trying to acknowledge all of them. I just want to thank President Rabb, because she's got something that's incredible and important, which is vision. And so we have a shortage of nurses in our city. We had a shortage of nurses going into phase 1. We have a shortage of nurses going into wave 2. And if we listened to President Rabb, we would have a nursing school. We would have a nursing school that is educating students primarily of color. Hunter does a better job at it than almost anyone else. We'd be changing what the racial inequality looks like in our city. And we would have been in a situation where we weren't struggling to open schools because we didn't have nurses. And so we did get nurses to open our schools. They're contract nurses. These aren't like full-time jobs. And so what I will just mention to Community Board 8 is we literally have a hole in the ground. It is one of the things that I am most unhappy about as council member, that this is not something I was able to necessarily get done yet. I hope to get it done. I'm hoping that the board would consider passing a resolution to say, please fill the hole in the ground with a school for nurses as soon as possible, so that we have enough nurses in our city for our children for this pandemic and the next, and for our hospitals and this pandemic and the next. And so happy to work with all of you. And I just want to thank our President Rabb for all of her leadership, her vision, and Abby Damsky from my team is going to be sticking around to take notes. I'm going to hop to the next event, which might actually just be tucking in my daughter. And thank you all for what you do.
Thank you so much, Ben. So I will turn it over in short order to President Rabb, but I want to go over just a few housekeeping items. Thank you, everyone, for joining this evening. And to those of you watching live stream or that will watch the recording later, just a few housekeeping items. Everyone, other than the speakers, are on mute. After President Rabb is done presenting and speaking, I will open it up to Q&A. You can raise your hand virtually by going to the bottom of your screen and raising your hand. Or if you are joining us via phone, please dial *9 to raise your hand and we will call on you. We ask that you sort of keep your questions and comments just on topic. And then just to give a little bit of context, President Rabb, and to everyone joining, you know, we on this committee have spent a lot of time since the pandemic hit in the spring, having a lot of conversations about sort of K through 12 and early education through 12th grade needs in the community. So talking to a lot of parents and students and teachers and representatives from the DOE about sort of the realities of remote learning, the concerns that parents had in the community. And I think, you know, really that took priority, and I don't think we spent enough time really thinking about higher education. And so as we talked about in the committee, we said, you know, who better than to have on, you know, than the president of the premier institution of higher education in our district and in our community. And so I'm going to turn it over to you. We're really excited to hear about just Hunter updates in general, but really sort of life in this sort of COVID-19 world for Hunter's students, faculty, you know, and administration. Thank you so much, President Ross.
Well, thank you so much for having me tonight. It's just it's an honor, and it makes also life feel like normal because we're back at a community board meeting, and what's more important in the neighborhood. Congratulations to Russell on your new election. We look forward to working with you, and thank you, Alita, for all of your leadership and partnership over the years. Peter, thanks for shouting out to Taina. Tai represents the Hunter motto, for which we're really proud, which is Mihi Kura Pachuri, the care of the future is mine. And we ask every student when they graduate, whether they're going on to pre-med or social work, as you said, or work in business, to take a part of their vision and their passion and remember to give back, because this premier public institution gave them this priceless education at a price they can afford. And certainly Taina and all of her work, and certainly on this community board, has done that. Peter, you're interested in higher ed. I know you have a business background. We have launched a new business certificate at Hunter College. One of our initiatives, which I think everyone on this committee would relate to, is that We believe deeply and passionately in a liberal arts education. We give one of the finest in the state, but we also think it's important for students to have skills in which they can enter the job market. So we like to match a history or an English degree with a business certificate so students can compete when they get out. So if you ever think you have some adjunct teaching, you'll give us a call and we can talk. Ty asked me to talk a little bit about how a large, wonderful urban educational institution has become a really vital remote institution. And this has not, of course, been without its challenges, as all of you have, I'm sure, experienced in your own professions and personal lives. But we're really proud of what we've been able to accomplish. And each time I have a meeting with students or faculty, I ask the question, where's the silver lining? What have we learned? What can we apply from this really tragic time to help us do what we do better in the future? So March 11th, you all remember, was a day where, just a few days before that, the government officials were still saying we would not be ending face-to-face activities. We would not be going remote. March 11th, really with no warning, we get a phone call from the governor announces that all classes within a week will be online. So we had a challenge of taking 3,000 individual classes and moving them on to remote. And then a few days after that challenge would be implemented, the entire state went on pause. So we first really looked and said, how can we take this commuting school, this school of 24,000 students, and make them the best remote learners they could be? And the first thing really is something Ty just spoke about and addressed that the committee's been working on, which is this issue of a digital divide, this issue that if you're going to learn remotely, you need the hardware and the software to be able to do so. And even just surveys that we had already done, 25% of our students said they didn't have their own computer. But even for the other 75, what they soon realized was that even when you have a computer, what is the bandwidth? Does the camera work? What is the Wi-Fi in your building? Do you have to share that computer with your little brother who also has to do his work for school? So what became a challenge was soon approaching a crisis. And we raised about $300,000 in both cash and in-kind to immediately get computers out, new laptops out to our students. And then, of course, it's a big challenge when you have a situation where you don't want to encourage students to come on campus. So we mailed many of these so we could get them to students. Soon we started to buy Wi-Fi boosters and other equipment so students could continue to learn. The second issue was you have your computer, you're beginning to learn, but the stress in your life is so intense. Our student body almost everyone has one job, some have two, some have three. Their parents are often in industries that were deeply affected by the economic shutdown. So we had very serious economic pressure on our students and began to raise money and gave out about $1 million in different level grants to students just to help them pay rent, stay above board, and move forward. Again, we also began to expand our food pantry, which had been on site. You don't want to encourage students to come on site. So we began to have a mobile food pantry. And we used our experts in geography, our GIS system, to say, where are the hubs of Hunter's students? Where could they walk 10, 20 blocks and pick up a food basket, pick up some technology? And by then we were thinking, what else do they need? We found that our dance students needed bars so they could do ballet exercises. We found that our music students needed electronic drums and keyboards so they could practice at home. So we started to use these vans to distribute food and technology close to students' homes, and we're really proud about how that worked. And then we moved all of the student advising online. And I think, Peter mentioned some of the things that have worked. We've found now that there's an intensity about the one-to-one on a remote session. Students are tending to show up on time. They're tending to show up more often. We're doing mental health sessions online. We're doing more group counseling online, and the students are showing up. So we're hoping that this, while nothing really, I think, replaces one-to-one advising, we feel like this is going to be a way to expand this student support that we're going to be able to give when we're through this real challenge here. The second piece of the equation when we went remote quickly was to support our faculty. And I think this is a subject that's not getting enough attention in the K-12 space, Taina, when you're talking about addressing that in the committee, and also in the higher ed. Most of our faculty are used to what we call chalk and talk. They're in front of a room, they're walking around, they have a big personality to be a great lecturer, they write a little on the board. All of a sudden, they're now talking to a Zoom screen. And remote learning is not the same as online learning. Online learning, you think through a class, you think what would be synchronous, what is asynchronous, how do you use materials? Now these really heroic individuals overnight are told you need to deliver your content online. So we have really tried to meet them and support them. And we've really invested in the spring and a lot over this last summer to support their being the best remote teachers they can be. And there's a lot of professional development. There are tricks, there are ways to do things, there's better projection, there's equipment, and just ways in which faculty have felt online learning becomes more effective. So we've tried to assess what works, we tried to borrow the best practices and give our faculty the training, and then for them also the hardware and the software that they need to succeed. And we're not there yet. We still keep learning, and there's all sorts of new challenges. One of the issues is really a challenge in higher ed is how do you give tests now? How do you do assessment? And there's certain faculty who feel very strongly against online proctoring. They feel that it really, students who, and even look at our own screen right now, you think about a faculty member giving a lecture. Those of you who we can see each other, we can connect at least in our eyes. People who don't have their cameras on for whatever reason, it's so much harder for a faculty member to teach to 30 black squares. But sometimes students just can't put on a camera. They're embarrassed about their home life. They don't have the privacy. They don't have the bandwidth in their computer. If they turn their camera on, they lose the sound. So now we're going to bring on a proctoring system that relies on a camera. Is that right or is that wrong? Our nursing and other faculty would say you have to do it because they're going to have a high stakes nursing exam at the end of their academic career. And if they're not ready to take a single high stake test, they're not going to be a nurse. So these are the things that you would not have expected, but continuing to support. We just made a change. Historically, we've had a childcare center that's only been available for our students. We just changed our charter so that it can accommodate faculty. We found that some faculty find it difficult to teach from home. So we have offices set up for them that are cleaned and are safe and have good technology where they can come on site and teach remotely from a room at Hunter. So it's a little counterintuitive, but we've set that up for our students, our faculty now, and we've also offered them the childcare. Notwithstanding all of these challenges, Hunter had 9 valedictorians in May. 9 valedictorians, and they were the American dream. 2 were not born in the US, one was from Turkey, the other was from India, and 5 were first generation Americans from parents in Turkey, Jewish refugees from Syria, Russia, Pakistan, and the Dominican Republic. And we like to tease the other 2 were from upstate New York, which is also sometimes almost considered at Hunter a foreign country. We had two of them won won Fulbrights and one was a loose scholar. I mean, it's just, that's the kind of thing that keeps you going. You're in the middle of a pandemic and you get this great news. Pivot on to summer, tell an interesting story. I wrote a Daily News op-ed and basically said, summer is for school. And we asked every faculty member and advisor to take this to heart. Think of it, our students were not going to get that perfect summer internship they were waiting for. They weren't going to get that travel fellowship, and if they did, they still couldn't travel. They couldn't study abroad. They weren't going to even get a job, and they weren't going to get that fun, just maybe relaxing counselor or lifeguard or babysitting job because nobody was hiring anyone to do any kind of work. So we said, you've got to go to school because that's what your job is right now. Stay in school, move ahead, take the class you need towards your degree. We had a 39% increase in undergraduate summer school this summer. It was so exhilarating to think that we had helped students do something towards their future. And we invested, we took $1 million and we paid for almost every one of those students about half of their tuition. So we incentivized them, but it was well spent money to see these students moving ahead. Then we got to fall and CUNY announced we would be online again. But with a little more planning this time, they said, you have some flexibility. How do you want to approach this? And I felt it was important to ask the students and faculty what kind of in-person connections were important and what made sense to push the envelope a little bit. So the first people that absolutely said they needed to come back, and remember, only come back safely, and we'll talk about that in a second, were our bench scientists. And within 2 or 3 months, by September, 47 investigators who have labs at Hunter and at the Weill Cornell Belfer building, where Hunter, you know, has a floor, were back in their labs. They have safety plans. Everything has to be approved. They have probably, 1/8 of the graduate students and postdocs and very few undergraduates that they would have had crowded in their labs. But they are doing their science. And this has just been really, really extraordinary. Then we start to think about what could be taught and what should be taught when we knew the safest thing was to still stay remote. And there were 3 things that were important to the faculty and to the students to do some in-person learning. The first were the sciences. So chemistry, biology, computer science, all had lab classes, and you can see here the students are in masks. They're 6 feet apart. Every class had a safety plan. Everybody that enters any CUNY school must fill out an app that asks if you have a temperature, who you've been, contact tracing information, whether you've traveled, and unless you get a clearance, you can't come on campus. So the sciences, again, 92% of our classes are still remote. But those 8 are meaningfully on campus, and the students are deeply grateful. Second area of classes that were important to bring back were in the arts. And some of you may have visited our beautiful down Tribeca facility where we've moved our MFA and BFA in art. Love for you to, when we fully open, to come down. We have extraordinary artists. There's an article in the Times today about one of our great artists, Derek Fajord, who is just an amazing artist, an MFA graduate. And we have 121 studios there. 115 students have returned to their art studios. Again, safely. Everybody has to fill out the form when they walk in every day. They have safety plans in their studios. And faculty, as you can see here, are coming. Everyone is very spaced apart, but here's a class where they're talking about a piece of art that a student has done, and they're doing the critique. And you can't do that over a computer. So we've done that. And the third area takes place mostly at our Brookdale campus, and that is in nursing and in physical therapy. And there's 2 of our physical therapists. You can see them all. They have face shields, they have masks. They just felt and I went down to watch one of the classes, and you see, all of a sudden 8 people pushing people in a wheelchair coming at you. They were training how to take someone out of a wheelchair and put them on a flat examining table. You cannot teach that over the internet. You just can't teach it digitally. You can't teach how to take blood pressure. So these clinicians just said, we know we're health professionals. We can do this safely. You need to trust us. So we have made it possible for them to teach their classes in person safely. And I don't want to jinx anything and say knock on wood, but there have been no incidents of sickness. It's, we've done a good job, and we've been very fortunate. So that's what we did with classes. And then we opened up certain spaces for students. And again, the general rule is please stay home. But as you know, with our population, most often first generation, serious financial challenges for so many of them, not living in apartments with a lot of space or privacy or quiet to study. And so every day we open 2 floors in the library, and every day we have at least 100 students who come on campus to just use the library, to take remote classes at Hunter, because that's a safe space for them. So we thought it was important. We do it safely, as I said, but to give them space, and they're very, very, very grateful. And we have some other students also in some of our special education classes where students have to learn certain modeling behavior, working with disabled students. So there's certain places where we really needed to have these on-site exercises. The other student spaces that we've opened, we've had some music practice rooms open for our musicians. Next semester, we're talking about having some dance studios where perhaps one student could practice, safely by themselves. It's very moving to me that we'll have students who will take the subway every day to come to Hunter, because this is a place that they can focus and feel like they're a student. And finally, we reopened the dorms just at Brookdale. And we have about 200 students living in the dorms. We're hoping to have some financial support for others to join them next semester. Again, and I'll show you a very quick little video. I challenged the students and said, I'm very nervous about having, a group of 20-year-old students living in the dorms. You hear these terrible stories you read about, will you really not get too close? Will you really not get too social? We know that's sort of the fun of college. So Maha, if you can just show a very quick little story about how the students responded when I said, you better be safe.
Hey, Brookdale, my name is Raf, and I'm the Residence Life Commissioner for this year. We are living in some pretty crazy times, but we as a Brookdale community are making the most out of these hard situations. For me, and for many of you, Brookdale is more than a college dorm. It's a home. Here are some things we can do to keep it that way.
Put your mask on at all times, outside your room and around campus.
Always maintain 6 feet of distance at all times.
Sanitize your hands at all times. Also make sure to take advantage of the sanitizing stations around campus.
Make sure to only enter your own room to prevent the spread of possible infection. Don't go into one another's rooms.
Following these rules keep our campus safe and healthy.
So I think they did that to make their point, because I sort of challenged. I said, if you're going to move back, we've got to be safe. And we're very proud. Actually, now we're testing students as they leave for Thanksgiving. Most of our students won't go far, but we are doing a whole testing protocol. Finally, we opened our historic Hunter campus schools, our K through 12. We have invested real thought and analysis on how to do it safely. We determined that one of the best ways to reduce the density of a K through 12 that was located in one building on 94th Street was to give the 9th through 12th grades And most of the 11th and 12th are going remote. They have some activities, but to move those 9th through 12th grades to our social work building in East Harlem, that has allowed us to create much, less density in each one of the classes from K through 8. So unlike so many of the public schools in the neighborhood, our K through 6 students are going to school 4 days a week, full days. Many of you may have walked by. You've seen we were able, through parent support, to rent tents. And we have our 7th and 8th grades going 2 days a week on campus. So we have, some students are still remote, but about 60% of our population comes to campus. And the parents and the students it was just so moving to see them come back and how happy they were to be able to learn on site safely. So every desk is 6 feet away. Everybody wears a mask. There's sanitation stations. There's all sorts of checks on ventilation. Every room has a special air filtration system. So we have taken safety as a top priority, but it's very meaningful to have opened the school. We have closed now because of the Board of Ed, but the wonderful Terry Rosendeutsch, who's with us today, who many of you know, is helping us monitor the situation. And so we could all learn about when we can go back. The parents there have very interestingly raised money, and they are doing saliva testing. And a very large percentage of the students are participating. And so far, the last weeks, 4 or 5 weeks since it's been in effect, there's been no cases picked up in the tracing. So again, it's a big initiative, but we feel strongly that the students, particularly the young ones at K through 6, really need the on-site connection. As I said, I always ask for silver linings, and with all the ups and downs, we were really incredibly just overjoyed and proud that a few weeks ago, U.S. News and World came out with their new rankings, and Hunter College has moved up 6 places in the last year to 17 in the Regional University North, which is our categories. And we are 5th among the top public schools in our region. So to do a 6th place jump in a year, it was particularly a crazy year like this, was pretty emotionally rewarding for us. I'm just so proud of our students and faculty that made that possible. Last week, we found that Hunter was named number 9 out of nearly 1,500 schools on CollegeNet's Social Mobility Index, which measures how students move up in economic ranks as they graduate and move on to their careers, and how we help low-income students really make a difference. A few final points. One, I really wanted to ask all of you to tune in and join us for programming that we're doing on a regular basis that we call Hunter at Home. While we can't be on campus, we really want to send the wisdom, the knowledge, just the pure enjoyment of our faculty out to the community. So some of the programming is about the COVID crisis and science. And some of it, we just like to really tell the world the types of things that our faculty know. So we had a couple of programs on animal behavior, one where we zoomed elephants in from Thailand. We have one of the world's top scholars on the Beatles. Our class creative writing program contributed talks by 2 authors. Our art history program has a number of people, including a program coming up right after Thanksgiving by the extraordinary Nari Ward, one of the great African-American artists known for his big public sculptures. So we're going to put in the chat what we call the on demand from Hunter at Home, and we hope you'll check out some of the great hour or so programs that we've done with our faculty on their research. And we'd love to get all of you to send us emails or lists, and we'll send you information about upcoming programs. Then, of course, this summer, in the moments where we're really trying to catch our breath with COVID, we really had to have a deep reckoning, as the rest of the country did, on the issues of systemic racism after the murder of George Floyd. And we convened a task force to advance racial equity. We have about 7 or 8 task subcommittees very busy looking at recruitment, admission, pipeline programs, how to enhance our curriculum. and also started a really interesting digital program called Speaking of Justice, in which we have addressed issues of monuments, of code switching, the issues of protesting, and we engage a lot of our alums and our faculty, and we have breakout rooms after for conversation. And again, would love the community board to be engaged in these conversations because we all have so much learning to do. So we are moving ahead. We're persevering. We're trying to be there for our students and our faculty in what is a difficult time. And then I think all of you know, there is the overlaying challenge of the state budget. I think most of you know that notwithstanding our title as City University of New York, we are a state-funded institution. The Board of Trustees usually passes a budget in June. There has been no CUNY budget this year. So for the first 4 or so months after the June deadline, we were giving 1/12 of our yearly allocation minus 20%. And in the last 4 months, we've been given that same amount of money, money to cover 4 months minus 20%. So it is a very, very tight exercise for us. We are trying to do all we can to support our students, to continue to raise money to do that. And we are just hoping that there'll be federal support for the state that will allow CUNY to continue funding us more sufficiently. So that is, just another challenge laid on top of what we're going through with the pandemic. But as I tell our students and faculty, we're Hunter Purple, we're going to move it through, we're strong, we're going to persevere. And I'll end again with what I always love, our silver linings. Notwithstanding all of what's going on, we just got in the last 2 days some really incredible news. We have I don't know which slide you have first, Maha. Yes. So we have 2 young men who graduated a year ago, both of the Macaulay Hunter Honors Program, who were accepted into Yale Law School. I think some of you may know Ed Friedman. He was an extraordinary advocate for disability rights, one of just the most eloquent spokesperson, has worked in the mayor's office in that area. And Saif, who you see in the Zahari in the next slide, is a loose scholar. So he's currently in Indonesia, and just another real commitment to public health. So it was really just exciting to hear this news. And the week before, we had 2 students who were named Schwarzman Scholars. And this is a program started by Steve Schwarzman, and he commits to paying for a year to live and get a master's degree in Tsinghua University in China. And Margarita Lavkovich, who you see, graduated in 2017 from Hunter. She was born in Belarus, came to this country when she was 14, studied science and honors at Hunter College, and was accepted to the Mount Sinai Medical School, where she's a 3rd-year student, and then just was made a Schwarzman Scholar. She already has 2 patents and has started a company for products to support retina health, and she's going to be an ophthalmologist, and a true American dream story. Hassani Arnhold, you see next to her, graduated in 2019. He is an LBGT advocate. He is someone who did our flagship Chinese program, so he is fluent in Mandarin, spent a year already living in China, and comes from a single father who spent much of his life homeless. So he is the ultimate American dream story. And next to him is Nibras Ahmed, who will graduate in June. Nibras is a Goldwater Scholar, which is one of the really prestigious undergraduate science fellowship awards. And Nibras is an alternate for Schwartzman, and we hope that he will also be accepted into the program. So just when you think the challenges are just deep and so challenging, you would hear these stories about these young men getting into Yale and these 3 wonderful people being at Schwartzman and alternates. And it just know that the Hunter motto is moving on, that we're caring for the future, and that our students are going on to do great things. So I thank you so much for this opportunity to update you on the neighborhood higher ed. I do hope that you will still keep thinking about our students for internships, even if they're remote. And I hope all of you will think about our faculty expertise. I think it's not just boasting to say we have one of the best urban planning programs in the country. Our faculty are always available to help think through problems. Our School of Education is, this is a focus of this community, of this committee, is trains 1 out of every 10 New York City public school teachers. So we would love to work with you on neighborhood problems, even in the remote context. So Ty, Peter, thank you so much for having me. And thank you for all you do for our community.
Thank you so much, President Rabb. That was enormously helpful, deeply insightful, and I imagine you all agree, very inspiring. I think just so proud as an alum of the college. I've always said, for those of you that are getting to know me, I'm new to the board. I spent 2 years working at Hunter College after graduating from there, and then I went on to Princeton University. Thanks in large part due to President Rabb's mentorship. And I still believe that after attending Princeton University, the smartest people I was ever surrounded by were at Hunter College, just truly some of the most inspiring students, nimble and independent and just go-getters. And so I'm thrilled to hear that things are going well at Hunter. If you have 10 minutes to answer a few questions, I can open up for Q&A like I mentioned. So time is a little limited. If you can raise your virtual hand, or if you are on the phone, please dial *9, and we will call on you, and our wonderful district manager, Will Brightbill, will unmute you.
So we have a couple people who have raised their hands. Lindsay Cormack and Rebecca Dangor after that.
Great, let's go with Lindsay.
Hi, thank you. President Rob, I'm a parent of a daughter who's in the 3rd grade at Hunter College Elementary School, and I do not envy any of the administrators' challenges of figuring out how to open, when to close, and this sort of thing. But we ended up having our daughter leave the school for a year, take a leave of absence, because we really didn't have a lot of transparency on some of the decision-making until like the day before school opened. So I wanted to know, moving forward, given that my understanding is the union is outside of the DOE union and the rules of the DOE maybe don't apply to our building, what do you think would be different this coming spring? Or does it seem like it will stay the same in terms of the decision-making that happened in the fall?
So I think we're trying to continue, Lindsay, to learn from this situation. I think it's something we're all thrown into, and we're continuing to think about refining. And I think if you talk to parents who've been sending their students, there have been changes, and we're continuing to refine the health protocols and also the learning protocols. And so I can't answer your question specifically, but I can tell you that we are committed to continuing to learn. And you do raise an interesting question. We do have an independence from the DOE. Over the years, we've often followed their model. And we opened because the governor and the mayor said that public schools should be open, but we also opened because we believed in, as I said, for students in that, particularly the K through 6, this contact is really important. And I think you all know in this committee, in your average public school in this neighborhood, students that are in the K through 5 space have school 1 day a week, sometimes 2 if they're lucky, be a lot of it density, whatever is happening in the public schools. We're really proud that we've been providing on-site 4-day-a-week work for our students. Is things perfect? No, but we like to continue to learn and hear from parents about how we can improve. But we would like to, our goal is to try to stay open as we can and to continue to educate our students. And hope that you and your family will return and consider returning.
Thank you, President Rabbit. I think you got a thumbs up from our committee member, Rami, who is a high school student. Say hi, Rami. And has been really helpful in giving his perspective as someone who's in school but learning virtually. Rebecca Dangor, if you could unmute her, please. Phil.
Hi, thank you so much for coming. This has been super interesting. I'm glad to hear that the libraries are open a little bit for study hall type activities, but I've been a little concerned about undergraduate and graduate access to printed materials. I understand that the library is working hard to ensure they have access to online resources, but especially when you're in your kind of upperclassmen years, those books can be an extremely unnecessary cost burden to have to find elsewhere. And I was just curious if there are any ideas to kind of improve access since they can't check them out.
Well, it's very interesting. We are also trying to work through that because in the very beginning, and I think it goes a little to Lindsay's point, how things started one way and we all keep learning, to try to make sure that it's safe to allow students to check out books. We haven't done, it's been advised against to do any kind of reserve for the reasons that are sort of obvious. But if people need books, we will get them the books. As I know faculty have come, sometimes we can get them that day, sometimes we will deliver them the next day. But I don't think we've really solved what would be the reserve textbook. So we are welcome to all ideas if students are finding that that is an issue for them and they can't access material digitally. So things in the stacks we will deliver, we'll send them to homes, we'll deliver them to front desk. But what would have been that classic reserve book is not deemed safe right now. So I don't know if you have a good suggestion for that.
No, I'll keep thinking on it because of course we can't just scan all the books and send it to all students. I'm pretty sure against a lot of copyright laws, but
do keep letting us know because that again, it's a brave new world. There's so many things that these are first impression and we're all trying to learn and all ideas are welcome, in whatever creative way we can be.
Yeah, I think it's especially important for the non-required books, the kind of research books students turn to when they're writing papers or theses, et cetera. Right, thanks so much.
I think Trisha and then Alita, please.
Hi, President Rob. I have two, I think, related questions, and I apologize if I missed this, but I'm curious if you could just clarify if you are providing any sort of testing sites for your own students and faculty to get tested at for the virus beforehand or before they leave for Thanksgiving. And I'm also curious about your messaging for presumably the students who want to travel potentially out of state to be with their families for Thanksgiving. What's your policy and what is your messaging on when they return on how they should be quarantining or are you mandating testing? If you could just talk a little bit more about those specifics. And I'm sorry if I missed it before.
No, it's it's a really good question. So one thing that's interesting about a Hunter that you don't have even in the SUNY and other schools is most of our students, we did a survey and a very small percentage are from out of town. And we don't think most of them will actually be traveling out of town. So we are requiring all students who are living in the dorms now to be tested, and we're testing on site. So we're just started that. This is new for CUNY, and we're ramping up. So it's a really great question. And, we thought it was something the chancellor really thought was important to do in the dorms. It's also been interesting, many of the other CUNY dorms, and it was advised that we've considered closing the dorms, to your question, to not let people come back because of the concern of spread. I just felt that the students who have chosen to live in the dorm, notwithstanding COVID and the risks, they did so because they need to be there. So we've decided we are keeping the dorms open. We're going to look at the tests so as students come back. And we are applying the quarantine rule that has been in effect by the governor that if you've been out of state, you have to quarantine for 2 weeks when you get back, which is why I think most of our students are not going to leave the state. So we haven't decided, we're talking about what kind of testing we will require when students come back, and that we'll have that, we're about to announce that in the next day or so. So we're doing the testing before they leave. We're looking at testing when they get back, and we're encouraging not to leave the state, and we will require quarantine if they do. And we're just really, I think from that little video, you can see the students themselves, they're taking this very seriously, we're really proud of them.
Thank you. We're just about out of time, but Alita, if you want to have your final sort of remarks or questions.
Thank you. Mostly remarks. I'm just curious about quarantining in a dorm though, and how that works when meals are generally taken, at least from when I was in college, in a cafeteria. So I had a question about that, but I also really wanted to thank you for being here. I know how hard Taina worked on this program, and to see someone from a premier academic institution, not just in our neighborhood, but in the city and the state, spend your evening with us is really remarkable and so important. So thank you.
Well, it's it's actually really completely my honor. So tell me your question again. I just
how quarantining in a dorm works.
So no, it's interesting because again, it's the CUNY dorm. It's just a little less conventional. So our Brookdale dorm actually didn't have a meal service, but so students often they have kitchens on each floor, and so obviously that doesn't work in quarantine. So we have made a commitment. If students had to quarantine, which was mostly anticipated, you moved in and you had a quarantine before you got here if you came from another state. But if you moved in and you were exposed to COVID, you would have to quarantine for 2 weeks. And we have made a commitment that Seamless would deliver you 2 to 3 meals a day and that we would pay for it. So we're really hoping this doesn't happen, but we do have a plan in place that would be our situation, because exactly why you can't go out, so it would be delivered and we would pay, and it was, we had little price ranges and things that we had worked out before. We have isolation rooms. If someone did get sick and they would be immediately isolated before they were transported to get care. So there was a very rigorous reopening before we could get CUNY approval to be able to open the dorm. So it was a lot of details. But the testing, to the questions that were just asked, is something that we just added for the Thanksgiving, and some came from the governor's guidance. And we're just working that through now, and we'll learn more.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. I apologize that we took so much of your time, President Rabb, but thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Wonderful Thanksgiving to everybody. Thank you for all you do for the neighborhood. Really appreciate it. Bye.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Add my thanks. I think she signed off, but nonetheless,
yeah,
my thanks to,
I wanted to leave it to you to close off.
And well, I'm also interested in I mean, to the extent there may be interest on the community board or within the community to look at how we can support Hunter. And one area in particular is this point that she made about, finding internships, whether they're remote or on site at a particular location. Because one of the things that I've got particular attention on is how we sort of improve the bridge, say, between our great institutions like Hunter and help people find sort of opportunities and work experience in what I poetically refer to as the real world. It's something I'm going to be looking at and contacting. I know there's a point person at Hunter who is responsible for those programs, but I just want to open that to anybody in the community who may have thoughts or ideas about where the opportunities like that might be available.
And to head off the question, sorry, Alita, before everybody's going to ask it, for the last 3 summers in a row, we've had the honor in our board office of hosting a Hunter College intern through the JFU program. So before anybody asks about it, yes, we're doing our part. We love our Hunter interns in our office. And the JFU program, if you don't know about it, go check it out. It's one of the best. The folks that we've had from there are just all brilliant. So just had to give my little plug for our awesome interns that we've had.
It's terrific. Thanks, Will.
And it came up in another meeting about kids, or maybe from Gal Brewer, not having internships, leading to some potential conflicts and confrontations on the street and other incidents. And so we were posting something. I know Brian Correa, among people, a board member, was looking for opportunities and had some with someone that he was working with. So we could post at some point for people who both may have internship opportunities, which of course are probably more difficult now since there are no offices, but also for people who are looking for internship opportunities.
Yeah, and I would just add, we talked about this at the last meeting, and I'm working on really compiling sort of a Google Doc of local institutions that offer different sort of paid and unpaid internships. And so I should have that ready in the next few weeks. And then, I think that could be sort of living document that we could sort of add on to, but starting with sort of local institutions.
I think that's great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure. So Peter, I'll turn it over to you. I don't know if you wanted to see if folks had other questions. I know President Rabb has signed off, but I didn't know if folks had sort of other relevant questions for the committee. So I'll leave it to you to close.
Absolutely. If anyone has questions or comments they'd like to add. One thing I have, Rami, please go ahead.
Yeah, so adding on to that, I don't know what month it was. I believe it was our June meeting or our May meeting. One of those meetings. It's in one of our minutes, but we discussed. It was actually the primary secondary topic of one of our meetings was the Summer Youth Employment Program, and at the time of our meeting, the Summer Youth Employment Program actually had been defunded as an effort to cut costs from the city. And there's numerous reasons behind it. And the primary one was cost. Secondary one was the fact that there were no businesses that were able to even take anyone else because they couldn't even afford to hire their own employees. And then, but thankfully, actually not long after we discussed this in one of our meetings, the Summer Youth Employment Program was refunded in part. I don't think it was totally refunded. So President Gail Brewer has been doing a wonderful job with that. I myself have interned for her office, and I would highly recommend anyone to apply if you are a teenager. It's an excellent learning experience. And just as a community board, that I think that is very important, especially as Youth and Ed Committee, is that our youth do need these opportunities in order to get into schools such as Hunter, but as well as get valuable working experience and career interest and while we as a community board are doing our part, there's always things that we can be doing more, such as encouraging youth to apply, because many youth don't understand how important internships are. And that's part of the school's jobs, but it's also part of a community's job is to help our students out. So it's just my 2 cents there.
Thank you, Rami. I think that was more than 2 cents. I'm buying it. I won't say how high I'll go in terms of paying for it, but I'll definitely invest in what you're suggesting. Invite others to look at how they can do the same. Any other thoughts or comments? Actually, I know someone here was actually a graduate, may still be on the call, a graduate of the urban planning program. I don't know if she'd be interested in making some comments about your experience and sort of what kind of opportunities that opened for you. It's Melanie, would you like to make a comment? It's Melanie Bro. Well,
yeah, they just unmuted me. Thank you. Hey everybody, I'm Melanie Bro. Full transparency, I'm Peter's niece. But yes, I'm a graduate of Hunter's Urban Planning and Policy Program, their graduate school program. And this was really lovely to hear. Obviously, like as an alum, I'm like not tapped into like what's happening day to day, but it's really lovely to hear that Hunter is really centering like student and faculty safety, and that's like really lovely to hear. But on the conversation of like internships and sort of after graduation opportunities, or even like while you're learning, I work for a nonprofit in the city that works on community development. So I'm definitely someone who's very interested in figuring out opportunities for to get current students to do internships at my organization. But we're also a member organization that works with 80 plus community groups, grassroots organizations, affordable housing, nonprofit developers all over the city who are constantly also looking for interns to help with their work. So, definitely think of me and my organization as a resource. I'm happy to add my contact information to the chat. It only goes to the host, but I'll send it, and they can feel free to connect me to folks who need it. So yeah, so thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, Melanie. Any other particular comments? I am in the process, and we'll be speaking with Taina and other members of the community board about our December meeting. In truth and advertising, I had not actually formally planned to have a session because I thought things would be a little crazy by the week of Christmas. But what does occur to me, and I'll just mention it in case it gets any interest, is perhaps a session focusing on the issue of career planning, career preparation. In the past, actually working with veterans in a variety of places, but one of it was a series of programs we put on at John Jay College, focusing on how you do sort of go through issues around job search, put together a resume, prepare for interviews, all of those wonderful things, and if that would be of interest, it's certainly something that we could look at or present a somewhat brief program. And then I discovered 10, 12 years ago, I'm really a teacher. When I'm teaching, I always say things I shouldn't say, so I have to throw in something that I probably shouldn't say. And so here's my favorite thing that I shouldn't say, which is after college, I went to business school. I went to a great business school out in the West Coast called Stanford. After that, I actually did some further graduate work and doctoral work at a school on the East Coast called Harvard. And as you know, probably the typical business program is 2 years. Excuse me. But I now do something I call my 5-minute MBA. So as a portion of that, I would be happy to present. And the point, I actually mean this fairly rigorously. It's only partly tongue in cheek. That in 5, it usually runs more like 10 or 15 minutes to give anyone who's interested a sense of what the 2-year program provides and a sort of a framework for thinking about any activity you may have. It could be creating a project to make it happen. It could be a sort of a nonprofit, or social enterprise you'd like to make happen, or it could be the next Google or Facebook you want to make happen. Gives you a framework to think about how to plan for that, put the logic together, and it's a starting point for that kind of conversation. Having said that, any other particular comments or issues or things people like to put on the table? I want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank you again, Taina. Wonderful session. And I mean, I knew we had a gem, before she started speaking, but as she spoke, and what particularly grabs me, among other things, is not just the thoughtfulness of all the steps that she and the whole Hunter team have put together to address and respond to these challenging times, but the wonderful success stories. And I know it was just a few, but highlighting those students. I had, in looking up at what was going on at Hunter, I had seen that they had a Marshall Fellow and a Rhodes Scholar, and I hadn't heard about this Schwartzman program, but those things naturally are sort of exciting, enlivening, and certainly get my high level of interest. I see, Marco, do you have a comment or question? I see your hand raised.
Oh, thank you, Peter. I didn't know that.
Know that what?
Well, I think my impression is affordable housing. Affordable housing is not to put people in a physical space. Affordable housing is to provide a physical space and to provide a means to go to the future, meaning that these people, it needs to have a help in education, especially to demonstrate that education is the base for the future. And I think this committee, we should concentrate with so many teachers that we have in the community board. They can create some mentoring programs, especially for low-income families. And that is social justice, by the way, that to work directly with these two developments that we have, the Holmes and Isaacs, and to see maybe create a mentorship program for those people that actually that educate them to see that the future for them is not to continue to live in those developments. The future for them is that is the base to do better and to have other housing opportunities like everybody else. So I think the committee should be oriented to bring those people because that's a disparity. I'm going to give an example. I'm going to use the example of the one fellow community member. I was in the funerals of Michelle's husband, and one of the remarks that one of the doctors said in the funeral said they never hear the F word from Michelle's father, Michelle's husband. I'm sorry, and that caught me my attention. While in the poor communities, the F word is more traditional and more prevalent, rather than in the Michelle's family. So who has more chance to succeed in life? Obviously, Michelle's children. I'm trying to make my example very straightforward. So the point is, if those minorities that have a big deficit in the language, I'm one of them, by the way, and the issue is help them not only to level the education and the knowledge, but also to explain to them that affordable housing or to live in these developments is not the right thing. This is just only the beginning. This is just only an emergency moment. So I think affordable housing, from my point of view, is more than to give a physical space. Is to give education, is to help them in mentoring, is to give an opportunities of jobs. It's all of that. And education is the main idea of all of that. And I think that's my comment. Thank you.
I just want to briefly underscore that, Marco. Thank you. Thank you very much for, making that suggestion. I totally buy into that. And perhaps, again, as part of a December session, we might look at how we can just, in terms of both individual initiatives and possibly developing programs. I actually, just as one example, was putting together a program on career coaching and a program on entrepreneurship at the Lenox Hill Neighborhood House, which went on for like 4 sessions, and think about ways that we can do things like that to support and extend, our array of experiences, backgrounds, and perhaps open some doors, for those in our neighborhood and our neighborhood housing, I think is something perhaps worth looking at. Greg Morris, come to think of that, please, I see your hand up. Love to hear your comments.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me at all?
Yes, can. Yes, can.
Yeah, just very quickly, I just want to say thank you for referencing the Isaacs Homes development. I'm the executive director at Isaacs Homes. And Peter, thank you for your presence at Isaacs Homes, or at least the senior center, to talk about that entrepreneurship component and the opportunities there. To Marco's point, I just want to make it known that there are lots of different ways in which our residents of Isaacs Homes could use support and investment, coaching, guidance, at all age levels. So specific to the education, and in particular to the young adults who live in the development, there are lots of different ways that the Isaacs Center is invested in that. And I look forward in 2021 to working with the community board to really support those residents, engage those residents, and further to help them build their success. There's a tremendous amount of resilience, passion, focus, diligence, and hard work in the community. There are disadvantages. So I look forward to working with the community board to address those disadvantages, overcome them, and ensure that every resident of Isaacs Homes is on a path to long-term success, especially the children of the Isaacs Homes development.
Wow, I just want to thank you for that comment, Greg. I know you've been doing that, ongoingly, and exploring ways that we can collaborate, participate, perhaps launch a new program, or even more than one new program to support, as you say, people at all ages, starting with young people in high school, helping them think about sort of, beginning to think about the issue of employment, career opportunities, mentorships, internships, and so on. And then the same thing for adults, continuing education, and for seniors. Love to have that conversation. Look forward to it. Any other quick comments? Having said that, I want to thank you all for participating. I want to thank you again, Tyne. It's been fabulous, really fabulous. And
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Will, for all your help.
Likewise. And thank you for your intern, Will. Thank you for making that happen. Thanks you all. Have a great night. Have a great Thanksgiving. And we will be in touch to have a session